Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest public webinar, putting flourishing on our list of COVID survival strategies. As with our past webinars, we've arranged for French interpretation services. So if you'd like to listen to French audio for today's session, you can access French interpretation by calling the number showing on the screen. And we've also placed this information in the Q&A. And please be sure to mute your computer audio if you do that. So here we are. It's a year to the day after we did our first public webinar on May 4th, 2020, which was called May the 4th Be With You. And we hope that the force has been with you during the challenges of the last year. But we know it hasn't been easy. And today we want to acknowledge the struggles that we've been experiencing over the last year. But we also want to try to find our way through those struggles with a sense of positivity. And that's why it's great that we're joined today by Louisa Jewell. Louisa is the founder and president of the Canadian Positive Psychology Association and author of the book, Wire Your Brain for Confidence, The Science of Conquering Self-Doubt. She's also the host of the Audible Originals podcast, The Awesome Project, launching this summer. Louisa contributes regularly to CBC Radio as a well-being expert and has been a featured expert in several documentaries, including The Science of Happiness and Mental Health in the City. She holds a master's degree in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania and was a professor of positive psychology at University of Texas, Dallas. Louisa is going to help us shift our mindset. And we use the word flourish intentionally because Louisa is going to tell us how flourishing is a part of positive psychology. She'll explain how we can do it now and how we can do it in the post-COVID future. Welcome, Louisa.
Thank you so much, Laura. I am so thrilled to be here. I wanted to, before we move into our event, wanted to talk and announce the Canadian Workplace Wellbeing Awards that are being presented by the Canadian Positive Psychology Association. This has been a challenging year for well-being, and we wanted to launch an award where we would ask organizations across Canada to share their programs, their ideas, their strategies, and resources for how they promoted well-being within their organizations. So if you have a good story to tell, we want to hear from you. The website you can go to learn more about the awards is cppa.ca/CWWA 2021. Once you join that community, we're going to be sharing everything we learn from each other because really it's difficult to know the how of well-being. Also, join us on May 6th at 12 noon. We're going to have a webinar where we'll tell you more about what the awards are all about. And we're also going to share the survey findings of a well-being survey that was done in Canada. It's a unique survey. It's the first of its kind. It was done by the Wellbeing Lab in conjunction with the Canadian Positive Psychology Association. You'll be really surprised by what we learned about well-being in the workplace in Canada. So join us for that. And also, if you're interested in assessing workplace well-being within your organization or for yourself, you can go to permahsurvey.com and you can actually access a survey yourself and you can take the pulse in your organization. So those are a few announcements before we get started. Thanks.
Louisa, thank you. We're also joined by Ann Baynton, Director of Strategy and Collaboration with Workplace Strategies for Mental Health, and she'll offer her insights as well.
Great, thanks, Laura. I just want to share with people that there were more than a few F words tossed around for how people are dealing with COVID. And I'm thrilled that Louise is here because I know some people may think positive psychology is thinking happy thoughts and pretending that everything's wonderful all the time. But as you're going to hear from Louisa, that's not what it is. It is about deciding that our quality of life doesn't have to be just getting through another day, that it can be better than that. So I'm excited that you're going to get to hear from Louisa what real, authentic, realistic positive psychology is all about.
Perfect. And so we have a few scenarios we want to cover today. And helping to introduce those scenarios and moderate the Q&A are members of the Canada Life Organizational Health Team. I'm Laura, and I'm joined by Laurel, Kim, and Audrey. And as you listen, you're welcome to note your questions in the Q&A in either English or French. Cover off those questions during the session. So Laurel, you're going to get us started with our first topic.
Thanks, Laura. Louisa, my friends and I have been talking about this particular issue for what seems like a few months now, and today's conversation seems like a good time to ask you about it. There's a lot of talk about the light at the end of this very long and dark tunnel, and I certainly do have hope, although some days it seems stronger than others. But nonetheless, this hope has my friends and I talking about all the things we want to do, where we want to go when this is all over. So those restaurants that we miss, those music concerts that got postponed, and not to mention, those trips, those beach vacations. But I'm a little curious how I'm actually going to feel when it's safe to start doing some things. As we all know, this has not been a month of change. It's been over a year of modified behaviors, separation from other people, and that kind of constant concern. So this may be a really big question, but I'm hoping you can share some tips, some strategies on what we can start doing now so that when it is safe to do so, we're going to feel energized and positive and be able to get out there and enjoy all those things that we have been missing.
Well, I hear you. I love to dance and I just miss going out dancing. So I definitely can empathize with what you're talking about. And I think what's important to know is that you can have this positive energy and you can have these feelings now. We don't have to put things on hold. We live in a society where we're always saying, I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when. And what we can be doing now is infusing our days with things that are more positive so that it's not going to be so much of a transition for us, but rather just a loosening of the restrictions that we've been under. So some of the things that I suggest is that people actually prioritize positivity in their day, whether those are small, positive emotions, whether those are small, pleasant experiences like cuddling with your dog or engaging in conversations with friends, or bigger positivity things like organizing a hike if you can do it, or organizing a bigger event on Zoom that brings your friends together. So know that a lot of what the research shows us is that people struggle, but you can also flourish at the same time. And not to get caught up in this idea, because I'll be happy when is actually the enemy of well-being. So we want to be able to know how we can flourish and continue to have those, again, those engage in those positive emotions, regardless of what's going on. Because even besides COVID, there are people go through divorces. There are caregivers for elderly parents. They're going through an illness. If we always have to put our happiness and these positive things on hold, then we're probably going to fall into a deep and dark depression. And so by doing that, what you're doing is you're continuing to what we call landscape your mind for resilience so that when it comes time to be free, you are going to have more of those psychological resources. And one of the best things that you actually do to be more resilient from that respect is exercise every single day. It is so powerful to exercise. And another thing that's really important is to know that there is a thing called post-traumatic growth. And that is that when we go through difficult experiences, we can find great meaning in these things. We can reinterpret the things in our lives that perhaps maybe we might change something in our lives. We might even be better than we were before. And having that in your mind can actually help you to go into that next phase to know, I might emerge from this a way better person than when I went in. So keep that in mind. I think that will strengthen you and prepare you for when when the lockdowns are lifted.
So, Louisa, I'll just add a few things there. I'm thinking about the post-traumatic growth, and I've been thinking about it from the beginning. And I really realized that one of the things is that this pandemic has caused me to slow down in a way that's really healthy for me. And I'm sure I'm going to ramp back up again, but I don't think I'll ever go there to where I was. And I also think that I'm going to appreciate the connections with people so much more. Like you, I see thousands of people every month when work is normal. And I think I'm going to see every single human being a little differently now than I did before. But to speak to Laurel's question about, that hesitance, I used to say I can deal with anything but uncertainty. And so the one certainty is that when somebody sneezes or when you hear somebody cough, we should expect it's going to make us uncomfortable. We should expect that we've been away from people, we've had heightened sense of exposure to germs. But rather than being disgusted or terrified, be amused. Say, I knew that was going to happen. I knew that that was the way that I was going to react. And make it just easier to be able to accept that we're going to take a few weeks to reacclimatize to just being out in public. And it could take us a couple years to find our new normal. So thanks for that question, Laurel. And we'll go back to you, Laura.
Thanks, Marianne. And sorry, my sound is cutting out a little bit. I hope other people can hear better than I can. My scenario is that as the pandemic has dragged on, that people are, of course, getting pandemic fatigue, and in particular, frontline workers who we know are confronted with people on a daily basis, who may be angry or agitated, and they have to navigate that. And people are dealing with so many things. I saw a billboard the other day that said, "You'll never understand the war someone is fighting in their own head, so just be kind." And that really resonates right now, because we have to keep reminding ourselves that everyone has their own private struggle, depending on their work or their family or their financial circumstances. And I've heard people say that the be kind mantra is something that they say to themselves every morning. It's the way they want to start their day, but sometimes it doesn't take long before you forget about that. So do you have any suggestions other than kind of practice that would you rather be right or be happy approach with your family? What tips do you have for us to help navigate those types of daily interactions?
Well, I think that's a really good mantra to think about, is just be kind, right? So if we can show people a little more compassion right now, if we can stop, take a breath before we respond, if we can understand that everybody is suffering right now, then I think with that little bit of compassion, we're able to react differently. And this is where I'm going to pull from the philosophy of my dear friend, David Paulet, author of The Law of the Garbage Truck. And that's really about, it's not so much what happens to you or how people talk to you. It's really how do you react to how people talk to you. And here's the thing, if we're always going to be triggered and get upset and get angry, well, you actually have a physiological response when you get angry. There could be a cardiac activation every time you react in a negative way like that. So to be able to ask yourself instead and say, where am I going to engage and where am I not going to engage? Now, if somebody is just dumping their garbage all the time on you and it's becoming much more difficult to handle, then you have to know when to react and when to not. So for example, I'm driving on the highway and a guy cuts me off. I'm going to decide not to engage in that because I'm never going to see that guy again. So whether I engage with them or not is not going to make a difference. So instead of me having to get upset and then breathing or doing yoga or whatever to let that go or let that out of my body, instead I'm just going to decide I don't need to engage in that negativity. I'm never going to see them again. I don't care. The cashier is rude to me at the Longos. I don't care. She's having a bad day. It has nothing to do with me. So deciding when you're not going to engage in things like that. Now, it's a little more difficult when it's a coworker that you have to engage with, or it's a family member that you're stuck in the same house with. And then that's when what you need to be able to do is you need to be able to sit down and have a good conversation with them and set boundaries and say, we need to work out different ways that we're going to work together because this is not working. Because just because we're all under stress doesn't make it okay to dump on each other. So we have to know when we're also showing up as the garbage truck. And if you find as well that you're engaging, you're reacting, you're triggering a little bit more, then what I recommend is to also have self-compassion. So compassion, and send it to yourself. And Kristen Neff is a leading researcher in the area of self-compassion, and she suggests 3 components of self-compassion. The first one is to speak kindly to yourself. Say the things that your best friend would say to you at that moment. The second one is to understand that you may be suffering. So take care of yourself. Maybe you need to engage in a little bit more self-care in order for you to feel more relaxed. And the third component is to just know that there are millions of other people who are in the exact same situation as you, that it's normal, that we're all feeling this heightened sense of anxiety and stress, and that it's okay, it's all right. Sometimes it's a lot easier when we can tap into that common humanity with each other, and to know, geez, I screwed up, and that's okay, because, you know, lots of people are finding that. Marianne, I don't know if you have something to add to that too.
I actually really love your explanation, because it's so balanced. Of course, we're gonna, lose it sometimes, and of course, people are gonna irritate us. But my friend Loretta Brill introduced me to a concept many years ago called the most respectful interpretation, MRI. And the idea there is to think, what would ever cause me to speak or act that way? And we have a piece on the workplace strategies for mentalhealth.com website called What Drives Behavior. And you start to think, what would get me really angry? Well, if I felt something wasn't fair. What would get me to withdraw? Well, maybe if I felt like I wasn't being heard. And you start to think that way, and it becomes much less triggering to listen to other people, because they're spinning in the center of their own universe. They're dealing with their own things, and that most of behavior has nothing to do with me. It's all about them and their feelings and their memories and their issues. And that makes it a lot easier not to get triggered. Yeah, so thanks for that, Louisa. I really loved your explanation. Kim, I think you've got the next question for us.
Yes, thanks, Marianne.
Marianne and Louisa.
Thanks, Marianne. I'd like to talk about being realistic about our goals. Over the past year, we've heard a lot about the importance of looking after ourselves, our family, friends, and coworkers. I was hoping you could spend a few moments to help us manage our expectations. A lot of people may not have been able to keep focused on their fitness, eating healthy, or have experienced significant mental health stressors. Some people are struggling financially, lost their job, while others have actually been able to save their money or excel professionally. So the idea of flourishing is tough when people have really struggled. So how do we reach out and help? And how do we encourage others to do that as well? We need to be realistic, because we're all coming from a very different place.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. When you think about the spectrum of struggling, or I think about the spectrum of depression, for example, when you're really at the bottom end, and someone asked me this the other day, how do you know when it's time to reach out for help? And I always say, it's when you're really not coping well. Can you not get out of bed? Can you not engage with your life? Can you not go to work? Are you not talking to your family? And it's okay to reach out for help. And I always share my experience. So I'm I have a master's degree in applied positive psychology, which is the scientific study of psychological well-being and human flourishing. I've read thousands and thousands of pages of research. I've applied everything to myself. And I have also, I teach this to people all around the world. I've been doing it for 12 years. And I know when it's time that I need help, so here I am, highly resilient, and yet we all struggle at times. I had my ex-husband passed away just less than 2 years ago of a brain tumor. And I ended up moving him back into my house, and we took care of him until he died. And it was so challenging, and I knew that I needed help. So I reached out to a grief counselor. And in fact, I'm still seeing somebody every once in a while when I need a little top up. So I think we have to get rid of the stigma of knowing when you do need help, because, you know, the other way that I look at it is we have one life on this earth. I don't want to spend that time in such struggle that I can't engage in my life. So I'm going to go and get help. Just like I go to the doctor when I'm physically not doing well, I'm going to do that. So there's a few other things though. And the thing is, the reason why the Canadian Positive Psychology Association exists is because we teach people about well-being before the adversity. Just like we teach people how to eat right and exercise so they prevent having a heart attack, we teach people about well-being so that they go into these adversities and these difficult times with the strength, with the resilient strategies, with the ability to reframe what's going on in our lives so that it becomes easier to go through these adversities. And I found that I have all these strategies that I have never fallen into a clinical depression. Because does it mean I don't struggle? Of course I struggle sometimes, but I find I'm not going into a mental illness because I have all of these terrific strategies. So a few things we can do to help people is be proactive about well-being in your organization or with your friends. I started a thing called the Well-Being Water Cooler. So I work with certain organizations. I get teams of people together. We teach a well-being strategy. I get people to interact with each other. It's half an hour, twice a week. I find that helps so much. And we don't call it mental health. You see, if you call it mental health, again, there's still a stigma associated, and the research bears this out. So call it well-being, call it a happiness circle. But what you're actually doing is teaching people real evidence-based strategies that help boost their resilience and their mental toughness. Another thing that we find is helping is well-being buddies. Get people to partner with each other, check in with each other, see how they're doing. And another thing that I engage in is what's called accountability buddies. I know that exercise is one of the best things that I can do for my psychological well-being. So I've joined a group where every single day, I tell them what I did today to exercise. And the good news about exercise is it's just about moving your body. You don't have to kill yourself doing CrossFit every day. You can just be doing yoga or other things. And so think about the well-being strategies in your life. Is it social? Is it exercise? Is it meditation? Is it yoga? What is it for you that boosts your well-being? Create an accountability circle so that you have people who are checking in on you to see if you did these things, because sometimes just doing these activities can boost your well-being. So reach out in those ways. And Marianne, I don't know if you have more to add to that.
Well, I want to reiterate what you said, Louisa, that those of us who are in the business and study this stuff, we still have to reach out for help. And I waited many years before I ever reached out for help because I didn't want to be a burden. And I thought, I can deal with it. I don't have to, until I actually crashed and burned and really couldn't take care of myself at that time, couldn't do what I normally do. But what I want to share here is that what was interesting is when I had to reach out, I realized how much that actually improved the connection and the intimacy of the relationships with people around me. Today, I reach out on purpose just because I want that stronger connection with people rather than seeing it as being a burden. I see it the way I see people reaching out to me, that it's an honor, it's a privilege, and it makes me feel like I have value and I have purpose. So reaching out should be part of raising the quality of your life and raising the quality of your relationships. So yeah.
And when you do reach out, it's true, you show other people that they matter in your life. So instead of feeling like you're a burden, you actually boost other people because they feel like, wow, Marianne's reaching out. I feel like I matter in her life.
Exactly. Exactly. I didn't see it for a long time. Now I do. And yeah, it makes all the difference. So thanks for that, Louisa. And I think Audrey's got the next question.
Thank you, Marianne and Louisa. Over a year ago, we thought we would be in lockdown for about 2 weeks, but here we are a year later, and some people have what we call the COVID fatigue. As Laura mentioned earlier, it seems like people are losing their tolerance for the behavior of others. I feel like I am putting less effort into my interaction with others, and my friend telling me they feel the same way. We're starting to become even more isolated. We So what are some other tips you can both share to help us stay motivated and put an effort into staying connected with our families, friends, and coworker, and to use your term flourish while we're still in this pandemic?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And certainly isolation has been such a challenge to our well-being. And the reason why too is because social connection is not a nice to have thing for well-being. What we find from the research is that social connectedness is critical to our well-being. The late Dr. Chris Peterson, who's considered a founding father of positive psychology, after he read all of the research on well-being, he used to say this: here's my talk on happiness. Other people matter. Thank you. That's the end of my talk. Good night. And, we would always chuckle about that, but really it was just a testament to, and he knew, so much about our psychological well-being and what was important, even down to the physical level. We're starting to find that people who are lonely, for example, that it has the same effects on their body as smoking as a pack of cigarettes every day. And certainly the risk of loneliness now has gone up dramatically. And one of the things to combat loneliness is, again, to feel like you matter, make other people feel like they matter. Like earlier, Marianne was talking about, is reaching out to others. If we can make people feel that they matter. But here's how I look at social connectedness for my well-being. I consider it like hygiene. So I could ask everybody on the call today, did you have a shower? Did you brush your teeth? Did you eat something today? Right? These are all things that are hygiene. These are things we do to, every single day. Did you have time to do those things? We might not enjoy having a shower. I do, but others might not enjoy brushing and flossing your teeth, but you do it because you know that it's important. And that's the same with social connectivity, is to know. So even if you're not feeling like reaching out, every week, book something with friends. And right now in Ontario, we're in complete lockdown. But if you're not, if you can get out with friends, go for a walk, do COVID friendly things, do some virtual things, just book it every day, every week. And then after you have that social connectivity, that event, whatever you had, book another time. So, say, okay, can we do the same time Thursday, next week, so that it's always on your calendar. It's like hygiene. BJ Fogg wrote a fabulous book called Tiny Habits. So if you're finding that you can't make this a habit, or you're finding it difficult, what he suggests is to anchor these, social connectivity habits with other things that you do on a regular basis. So for example, I just made my morning coffee. So I might make a rule and say, every time I have my morning coffee, I am going to call a friend. I'm going to reach out, and on every day I'll know who I'm going to reach out to, or I'm going to call my mother. If she brings you energy, she might not bring you energy, but so somebody that brings you energy. So that might be so you're anchoring in your morning coffee. You're going to anchor it with some sort of social connectivity exercise that you're going to do. And I bet you do feel better after you do that. So plan something every week. And in the workplace, we're missing that personal interaction time. So I highly recommend that you add at the beginning or at the end some what we call water cooler time talk. So that you can say, hey, check in at the beginning, and just, for the first 15 minutes, it's just personal talk. It's just, hey, how did it go? How was the wedding? How was, whatever it is. Or to schedule every week time that you can just have personal interactivity. That keeps those personal connections going. You don't feel as isolated anymore because you're actually connecting with people at a personal level. So those are just some ideas. Marianne, I don't know if you have a few more.
Yeah, those are great ideas. Thanks, Louisa. I also realize that for some people, reaching out to family members or friends, there's a lot of people that I know that all of their relationships are about being of service because somebody needs to vent or somebody needs something. And so they find that, reaching out just drains them even more. And whenever I get into a pity party about I'm exhausted and I can't give to anyone else, I realize that if I stop thinking about myself and think about someone or something else, I actually do feel better. But it's about getting the right kind of interaction going. So for me, this is my second foster animal. So I get a really sick animal that needs care and take care of them. And that's been tremendous for pulling me out of, being alone and wishing I wasn't. And childcare for me also does that. Now, for someone who's home with, 4 little kids, yeah, that's not going to work for you. But it's that we need to find those things that get us out of our head and help us put our energy out there, because it comes back to us so much. Someone said that the antidote to loneliness is authenticity. And it's that idea of who can you be your real self with, that you're not being the parent or the advisor or the mentor or, the rescuer. Who can you just be yourself with? And that's a really interesting thing for myself as well, is that when you find those people that you don't have to be anything for, hang on to them, because they're the ones that fill that energy back up.
Yeah, I love that. And I love earlier when you said too, to reach out to others. And we often don't think, as we're struggling ourselves, that, oh, what can I do to help others? And in fact, doing those altruistic things can really boost your well-being. It also takes your mind off yourself. Don't you find when you're feeling depressed, you're like, oh, poor me, and you're just looking at yourself, you're lying in bed, right? But if you can turn outwards and say, how can I help somebody else? Wow, that's such a boost to your well-being to be altruistic like that. So I love that idea, Marianne.
Yeah, that's great. So I think now, Laura, can we open it up for other questions?
Yeah.
Okay. So if anyone has a question that they want to throw into the chat for Louisa or for myself.
Well, we certainly have more than one question. Thank you everyone for filing your questions in here. We could keep Marianne and Louisa until dinner time, I'm sure, but I have retrieved some really good questions, and I think it helps balance out the conversation that we've had thus far. So here's one I'd like to read out. I'm highly resilient, and although not in the healthcare field, I do support those who are unwell. And I find at the end of each day in this past year, I have nothing left for me. What is one thing you can recommend for those who have nothing left at the end of the day, when there is no energy left actually to do anything? So it sounds to me like a self-care question, and so I'll turn it over to you, ladies.
Do you want me to go first, Marianne?
Yes, Louisa.
Okay. So first of all, there is a lot of research now on what we call compassion fatigue. So you're taking care of others, And because you are empathizing so much with the person that you're working with, it really does drain you of your energy. And what we're finding is it's not actually compassion fatigue, it's actually empathy fatigue. So when you're engaging with someone and being empathetic and putting yourself in their shoes, it's almost like you're taking on a lot of that energy, and it can drain you. What we find is that if you can show compassion, that in fact that might energize you. So kind of create a little bit of a boundary between yourself and the person that you're working with. And that's really hard to do when the person you're caregiving for is a family member, you know, somebody that you're taking care of, that you are highly emotionally invested in. So, but to be able to have a bit of a boundary. And then what I did when I was caregiving with my ex-husband who had a brain tumor, we tried to find joyful events throughout the day. We tried to use humor throughout the day. I would think every day, how can we make today a memorable, happy day so that it doesn't always have to be about the negative? And I found that even just those little things, going to the hospital and making jokes with the nurses, you know, just doing those things throughout the day, because what those positive emotions do is they actually build psychological resources. They give you a release from the stress. So think about how you can incorporate some of those small positive things to re-energize you. We know that depletion happens with high levels of stress. So the more you can reframe, there's a fabulous book by Kelly McGonigal called The Upside of Stress. Even if you just look at stress as helpful, you will reframe it in your body as well. So you will have less of a physiological impact of stress if you can just see stress as helpful, as energizing for you. So reframing stress, having those fun things throughout the day to kind of relieve you, fill your body with positive emotions. And then also to know that there has to be perhaps maybe some sort of ritual that you do at the end of the day that says, okay, goodbye to that part of your day. I'm going to enter into some sort of ritual. I know some people who play incredible music all the way home, or they listen to uplifting things on their way home. And that's the transition. To then make it in. And then to know you can do things like even have a nap replenishes you. So know what replenishes you and engage in some of those things. So those are just some ideas. Marianne, you go ahead.
Yeah, so yes, and because all of the things that you talked about, when I've been caregiving for people, I realized that what I need to do is say, I can't, because it's been terminal illnesses, I can't save this person. I can't always even make them more comfortable. So what my job is to love them. And having that mindset really sort of reduce some of the stress, reduce some of the pressure to, I've got to get this and I've got to get that done. It's like, no, if my job is to love them, then I have to be in a loving state of mind all the time. And that helped me a lot. And, you know, some people would say, yeah, take a nap or do a bubble bath or watch TV, do something for yourself. I actually found that taking a shower and imagining the stress being washed away was what refreshed me. And then I'd actually get dressed again. And so it was like, that's done. It's washed away. Now I'm going to go forward. And most of the time I'd have that shower and go back to the person I was caregiving, but it was just a cleansing, if you will.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. Laura, you got another one?
Yeah, have another one here. From the outside, how can you detect a person that may be in a difficult situation? What are some of the common signs to look for?
Well, I think some of the common signs are coping, you know, so if the person is not coping very well, then, you know, so they're not responding, they're not getting out of bed, they're not making it to meetings, they're very quick, impatient, angry with you, not themselves. I think these are all signs that people might need some help. The problem is that people are not going to be ready to accept help until they feel that they're ready to accept help. And so to just be able to, oftentimes what I'll say is, please tell me what is the best thing I can do for you right now, as opposed to just saying, oh, if there's anything I can do, let me know, because it sounds kind of like an empty offer. I always just say, I'd like to know one thing I can do that can be really helpful for you right now. I had a friend who I could tell was struggling. And she said to me, I'd really like to exercise daily. I said, well, join my accountability group. So she did. So she joined, I gave her all the information, and she's exercising every day. So I think that's a good question to ask. I'll turn it over to Marian.
Thanks, Louisa. I think that what's more important than recognizing a sign, which is often very late in the game, and as Louisa said, I used to be a rescuer, right? I'll fix it, I'll do it, and realize, first of all, how arrogant that is, because if somebody doesn't want my help, I should not give it to them. But also that it is that we're ready when we're ready. So what I think is, what I think is important is that we need to have a conversation all the time about how we're coping, how we're managing, rather than waiting to see those signs. So saying things to people like, what's the biggest challenge that you're dealing with right now? And how are you coping with the fatigue? And how are you managing to work from home and deal with all of this? Have that as a normal conversation, and then you don't have to wait till somebody is really struggling before you're aware of these things. If you're a leader, this is even more important, to be vulnerable, be transparent, be open about these things. And as both Louisa and I shared, make sure people don't think that leaders don't struggle, that leaders don't reach out for help, that leaders don't have the same kinds of stressors, because unfortunately, it's still a misconception that that's true. And it makes it difficult for people to come forward because they don't want to be seen as less than.
And maybe just one more quick, I was just going to say, we've had quite a few questions asking about how to help kids through this challenging time. I think we've got a lot of parents on the line joining us today. So I'm just wondering if maybe this last question, we can maybe just touch on some helpful strategies for families and parents kind of supporting kids through this.
Well, I think with children, it is a real struggle. And I think the more we can model what we can do, the more we can show our kids that we're struggling as well. And how we're getting through the struggle, I think, can be really critical. Gratitude is a great thing to practice with kids. Knowing that we can do things like meditation with our kids, show them some strategies that can help them to relax, to reduce the stress that they're feeling, and to also allow them to voice their concerns. I don't have young kids at home. My kids are older, but I do know parents who their kids are really struggling and are very upset, and to be able to allow them to voice what those concerns are and to focus on the things that they can do, because sometimes kids can be so focused on what they can't do or how they're being restricted or they can't see their friends. And as opposed to that, to be able to redirect them towards things that they can do. We do a great exercise at the end when people are going through tough times called the 3 good things exercise. Get kids to say at the end of each day, what were 3 good things that happened today? And it's really hard for them to see the 3 good things when they're struggling, but they can always find something. Like we had pizza lunch today, and that's my favorite. Or yeah, the dog was funny today, anything. And what that does is it redirects their focus to the positive. It sweetens their memories of the day, and it gives them hope that they can actually find good things the next day that they'll be looking for. Let's go ahead, Marianne.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, those are all great ideas. I think the only thing I would add is when I was really stressed and exhausted, I would plunk myself on the floor with my kids and say, okay, let's play. So I'm too tired to do anything. But because I was sitting there paying attention to them, and they thought that that was a wonderful, fun time. And so it's really us being able to give positive energy to our children rather than letting them breathe in our secondhand stress. It's easier said than done sometimes, but I think the children will be able to deal with being away from their friends if where they are instead is someplace that is open and honest and positive for them.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Louisa, so much, and Marianne, for your wisdom today. It looks like we're at the end of our 45-minute segment, so thank you again for joining us. And we've provided your contact information here, links to the website and website for the Canadian Positive Psychology Association as well. And remember to look for the recording of this session in English and French on the Mental Health YouTube channel. It'll be posted in the next little while. And until that time, please stay safe, everyone. And thanks to all of you who took the time to listen today.